I never thought a simple change in plans would lead to the most gut-wrenching moment of my life. Started like any other Friday evening. My wife, Rachel, told me she'd be late coming home. "Team dinner," she said with that familiar smile. The kind of smile that used to reassure me but now made me question everything. Work had been chaotic, and I wasn't in the mood to head home to an empty house. So, I decided to stop by a cozy Italian restaurant near the office for dinner. A little pasta and wine might be just what I needed to unwind. As I walked into the warmly lit dining room, the comforting aroma of garlic and fresh basil hit me. But so did something else. Someone else. There she was. Rachel. Dressed to the nines in the red dress I bought her last Christmas. But she wasn't alone. At her table was a man I didn't recognize, leaning in too close, laughing in a way that made my stomach twist. For a second, I thought I'd hallucinated. But no, it was real. Too real. I froze, unsure what to do. The hostess, unaware of the storm in my head, greeted me cheerfully and asked if I had a reservation. Just one?" I muttered, my eyes still locked on Rachel. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free from my chest. Was this a work dinner? It didn't look like one. Not with how her hand casually brushed his. I told the hostess I wanted a seat in the back. From there, I could see everything without being seen. My instincts screamed at me to march over and demand answers, but something stopped me. I needed proof. I needed the truth in its raw, undeniable form. As I watched, I texted her, "Hey, when are you coming home tonight?" Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and put it down without responding. My heart sank further. If she had nothing to hide, why wouldn't she answer? I flagged down a waiter and ordered a glass of wine I didn't want and a plate of pasta I couldn't eat. My focus was entirely on them. Her laughter cut through the soft clinking of glasses and murmur of conversations, each sound driving another nail into the coffin of my trust. But I wasn't done yet. I sat there, swirling my wine and pretending to be absorbed in my phone, while my heart broke into a million pieces. They were oblivious to me, wrapped in their private little world. He leaned in closer, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. It was intimate, casual, and soul-crushingly familiar. My hands shook as I took out my phone. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it. Call me paranoid, or worse, make it seem like I was crazy. I needed evidence. With the dim light of the restaurant on my side, I discreetly snapped a few photos. One of her smiling at him, another of his hand on hers, and the last one, the one that made my stomach churn, was her leaning forward, her lips dangerously close to his. My phone buzzed, breaking the spell. It was her text. Probably late. "Don't wait up, babe. Love you. Love you." Those words stung more than anything else. How could she? I forced myself to stay calm, even though everything inside me was screaming to flip their table and shout, "What the hell, Rachel?" Instead, I signaled the waiter. "Do you have a spare uniform in the back?" I asked. He blinked, confused. "A uniform? Yeah, I'll make it worth your while." I slipped him a $50 bill, my voice steady even though my heart was anything but. He hesitated for a moment before nodding. 5 minutes later, I was wearing a black apron and holding a tray. The staff let me blend in, thinking it was some kind of prank. I took a deep breath and walked over to their table. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone polite, almost friendly. Rachel looked up, her smile faltering the moment she saw me. Her face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The man, her date, had no idea who I was. "Oh, we didn't order anything yet," he said, his voice casual and oblivious. I ignored him and turned to Rachel. "Can you tell me?" I said, keeping my voice just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Which wine pairs best with cheating? Red or white?" Her face froze, her eyes wide with panic. The color drained from her cheeks as she whispered, "What are you doing here?" The man looked between us, clearly confused. "Rachel, what's going on?" "Rachel," I repeated, emphasizing her name as though it left a bitter taste in my mouth. So, we're using real names tonight? That's a nice change. The restaurant went silent. Heads turned, people whispering behind their hands. Rachel sat there, completely stunned, while her so-called date squirmed in his seat. She started, but I cut her off. You were going to let me sit at home tonight, weren't you? Believing you were working late. Like a fool. I turned to the man. How long has this been going on? A week? A month? Or am I just late to the party? He stammered. I didn't know she was married. Of course you didn't, I said with a bitter laugh. Because that's what cheaters do. They lie to everyone. Rachel finally found her voice. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I snapped. But don't worry, Rachel. I have pictures to prove it. The man, her date, pushed back his chair, his face a mix of embarrassment and fear. I had no idea, man. I swear. He grabbed his coat and practically bolted for the door, leaving Rachel alone to face me and the growing audience. She stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. We need to talk. Somewhere private. She hissed through gritted teeth, her voice trembling. Private. I nearly laughed out loud.
No, Rachel.
Privacy is what you traded away when you walked in here with him. Her hands clenched into fists. You're blowing this out of proportion. Let's go home and talk this out. Talk it out. My voice cracked with disbelief. Do you think a conversation is going to fix this? What could you possibly say that would make this okay? People around us whispered, their eyes darting between us like they were watching the juiciest drama unfold. A waiter awkwardly stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. Sir, maybe you'd like to. No. I cut him off, my voice firm. I'm not done yet. Rachel reached out to grab my arm, but I pulled back as if her touch burned me. Don't. You don't get to act like the victim here. Please, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Just give me a chance to explain. Explain? Fine. Let's hear it. I crossed my arms, staring her down. Tell me how you ended up here, dressed like that, holding hands with another man. Was it his idea? Or did you come up with this brilliant plan all on your own? Her lips quivered. It wasn't like that. He's just someone from work. It was dinner. That's all. Dinner. I scoffed. Rachel. I sat here long enough to see that this wasn't just dinner. Do you laugh like that with your coworkers? Do you let them hold your hand? Does this happen every time you work late? She didn't answer. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the anger and betrayal were too much. You've destroyed everything, Rachel. Our marriage, our trust, everything we built together. And for what? A cheap thrill. Her tears spilled over, but they didn't move me. I made a mistake, she choked out. Please, we can work through this. I love you. Love. The word was bitter on my tongue. If you loved me, you wouldn't be here right now. You wouldn't have lied to me, sneaking around behind my back. She reached for me again, but I stepped back, shaking my head.
No, Rachel.
This is on you. You made your choice the moment you walked through that door. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving her standing there, alone in the middle of the restaurant, with everyone staring. The cold night air was sharp against my skin as I walked to my car. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. But before I could start the engine, Rachel caught up with me. Wait, she called out, her voice hoarse with desperation. You don't understand. I turned, barely able to look at her. What don't I understand, Rachel? That you lied? That you cheated? That you threw away everything we built together? Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't flinch. It's not what you think, she whispered, her voice shaking. Oh, really? I scoffed. What is it then, Rachel? Enlighten me. She hesitated, her lips trembling. That man. He's not just someone I work with. I froze, my anger giving way to confusion. What are you talking about? Her hands shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. He's Jack. The name hit me like a freight train. Jack, my half-brother. The man I hadn't spoken to in over 10 years. The man who walked out on our family and left us in ruins. Jack. My voice was barely a whisper. Rachel nodded, tears spilling freely now. He came back into my life a year ago. He told me he wanted to make amends with you, but he didn't know how. We started talking, just talking at first. I swear. But then, her voice broke, and she looked away. But then what, Rachel? My voice cracked. My fists clenched at my sides. You thought it'd be a good idea to have an affair with him? With him. It wasn't like that, she cried. He said you wouldn't forgive him, that he was too far gone to fix things with you. He said you wouldn't understand what he'd been through. I took a step back, my head spinning. And you believed him? You chose him over me? The man who wrecked my family and disappeared. It wasn't a choice, she whispered. It just happened. And when I realized how wrong it was, I tried to stop. But he what, Rachel? I snapped. What could he possibly do to make this okay? She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. He threatened to tell you everything, to ruin us, to take everything we had. I stared at her, my mind racing. The betrayal was deeper than I ever imagined. Not only had she cheated on me, but she had done it with the one person who'd already destroyed so much of my life. Without another word, I took the envelope from her hands and opened it. Inside were photos of Jack and Rachel together, his arm around her, his lips on hers. But one photo stood out from the rest. It was a picture of Rachel, sitting on a hospital bed, holding a baby. What is this? I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. I looked at her, my chest tightening. Is this his child? Rachel's silence said everything. I staggered back, the envelope slipping from my fingers. My entire world shattered in that moment, the pieces falling around me like broken glass. Get out of my sight, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Please let me explain. Get out, I roared, my voice echoing through the empty parking lot. Rachel turned and ran, her sobs fading into the night. I stood there, my fists clenched, staring at the photo of the baby who wasn't mine. I don't have the answers. I don't know what comes next. But here's what I've learned. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it's never the same. So I'll ask you this, what would you do? If you were standing in my shoes, with your heart ripped apart and your world flipped upside down, what would you do? And remember this, trust the people who earn it, not just the ones who say they deserve it. Actions will always speak louder than words.